The galaxy was dying. Admiral Vexithera stood in the command center of Kepler Prime, staring at the massive screen that showed their entire galaxy. Most of it was painted red, the color of death and conquest. The red zones were spreading like poison, world by world, system by system. The warning sirens screamed through the air. Emergency lights flashed across the metal walls, casting strange shadows on Admiral Vexithera's crystal-like skin. She was from the Zapharan race, beings made of living crystal who could live for thousands of years. But today, she felt older than ever before. Admiral. Lieutenant Kamor called out from his station. He was from the Arathi species, tall beings with gas-filled suits and long tentacles for arms. His voice was shaking with fear. "We're getting the final message from Battle Group 7. Battle Group 7 was their last hope. 15,000 ships. Their best commanders. Their most powerful weapons. If they were gone, then nothing could stop the Devourers." The message came through filled with static and the sounds of battle. Commander Zito's voice was barely heard above the noise of exploding ships and screaming metal. "Coalition Command, this is Battle Group 7. All ships lost. Repeat, all ships are lost. The Devourers have broken through our lines. Their main fleet is heading straight for the core worlds. You have maybe 48 hours before they reach your position." Then silence. Nothing but empty static. Admiral Vexithera closed her 3 eyes and felt her crystal heart beating fast in her chest. Around her, officers from 12 different alien races stood frozen in shock. The collectivists, beings who shared one mind among many bodies, were buzzing with panicked thoughts. The granite folk, whose skin was made of living rock, stood perfectly still like statues. 48 hours. After 3 years of war, they had 48 hours before the Devourers reached the heart of their civilization. The Devourers were unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. They weren't living beings driven by anger or greed. They were ancient machines, cold, smart, and unstoppable. They ate entire star systems to fuel their endless growth. They broke down planets into raw materials. They drained the energy from stars and left them cold and dead. They turned everything they touched into more of themselves. The Coalition had fought them with everything they had. The crystal cities of Zafir had given their light-based weapons. The Arathi had provided their storm ships that could ride on solar winds. The collectivists had offered their perfect teamwork and shared minds. The granite folk had built massive fortress ships that could take incredible damage. None of it mattered. The Devourers learned from every battle. They adapted to every weapon. They overcame every defense. They were patient and smart, never taking risks they didn't need to take. They simply crushed their enemies through superior numbers and better technology. "What forces do we have left?" Admiral Vexithera asked. Lieutenant Kimor's tentacles moved quickly over his control panel. "We have the home defense fleets around the core worlds. Maybe 8,000 ships total. But most are patrol vessels and old models. The planetary defense platforms add another 2,000 weapons. 10,000 defenders against an enemy that had just destroyed 15,000 of their best ships. The math was simple and brutal. "Sir," Sergeant Thrick called out from the communication station. She was from the insect-like swarm race, with clicking sounds when she talked. "We're getting surrender requests from 6 outer colonies. They want to know if we can negotiate with the Devourers." Admiral Vexithera felt anger flow through her crystal form, making it glow brighter. "Tell them there is nothing to negotiate. The Devourers don't want our surrender. They want our atoms." It was true. The Devourers had never answered any attempts at communication. They simply arrived at a system, studied its resources, and began the harvest. Planets were stripped down to their cores within days. Stars were drained and left as cold, dead balls. Nothing remained except empty space. "Admiral," said Dr. Kilwin, the chief science officer. He was an old Zapharan whose crystal form was dim with age and worry. "Maybe it's time to think about evacuation. We could save some of our people." keep our cultures alive in hidden colonies beyond the galaxy, and leave billions to die. Admiral Vexithera asked, leave our worlds to be consumed while we run and hide. It would be survival, Admiral. Sometimes that's all we can achieve. Admiral Vexithera turned back to the galactic display. The red zones were spreading like an infection. In 3 years, the Devourers had consumed nearly 1/3 of the galaxy. Their advance was slow but unstoppable. Sir, there's something else, Lieutenant Kamor said carefully. Before Battle Group 7 was destroyed, they sent some unusual sensor readings. They detected massive gravitational waves at the edge of the galaxy, near the void between galaxies. Gravitational waves. Yes, sir. The readings suggest something very large coming out of dark space, but it could be false readings from battle damage. A new alarm began to sound, a different tone that made everyone freeze. It was the long-range scanner alert, warning that something big was approaching their system. Contact at Sector 27. The scanner operator reported, multiple contacts. Devourer scout ships. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. The room exploded into controlled chaos. Defense platforms powered up. The home fleet moved into position. Evacuation ships prepared to launch. But Admiral Vexithera knew it was meaningless. 6 Devourer scout ships could destroy their entire defense fleet. Admiral, Dr. Kelwin approached her quietly. There are old archives in the deep vaults, stories about the silent species that once lived in this galaxy. Myths and legends, Admiral Vexithera replied. Stories to comfort children. But the legends say they didn't die. They say they went into the dark spaces between galaxies, waiting for when the galaxy needed them most. Admiral Vexithera looked at the old scientist. His crystal form was flickering with hope, a hope she couldn't share. Dr. Kelwin, even if the silent species existed, they'd been gone for thousands of years. Why would they return now? Because, the old Zaffiran said quietly. According to the legends, they left because they knew this day would come. Admiral Vexithera turned back to the display showing the approaching Devourer scouts. In 6 hours, they would arrive. In 48 hours, the main force would follow. And then the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known would become nothing more than raw materials. All hope was fading, but in the deep archives below, ancient data crystals held secrets that no living being remembered. And at the edge of the galaxy, something was stirring in the void between stars, something that had been waiting a very long time for this moment to arrive. Dr. Kelwin walked through the ancient tunnels deep beneath Kepler Prime. His crystal form glowed softly in the darkness, casting strange light on the old walls. The corridors were older than the Coalition itself, carved thousands of years ago by the mysterious silent species before they vanished from the galaxy. The walls showed geometric patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Mathematical designs that seemed to move when nobody was watching. His footsteps echoed in the empty halls as he carried his equipment toward the deepest vault. Above him, the battle for Kepler Prime was about to begin. The Devourer scouts had arrived exactly 6 hours after their detection, just as predicted. They hung in space like dark metal spiders, scanning the planet's defenses with cold efficiency. Admiral Vexithera stood in the command center, watching the enemy ships on her display. 6 scout ships against 8,000 defenders. It should have been easy, but she knew better. Each Devourer ship was worth 100 of theirs. All ships, prepare for combat, she ordered. Target the lead scout ship. The home fleet moved into attack formation. Crystal ships from Zafir blazed with rainbow light. Arathi storm riders crackled with electrical energy. Granite folk fortress ships advanced like moving mountains. The sight was beautiful and terrifying. The first salvo of weapons fire lit up space like a second sun. Laser beams, plasma bolts, and energy missiles struck the lead Devourer ship. For a moment, Admiral Vexithera felt hope. The enemy ship's shields flickered and sparked. Then the Devourer ships began to adapt. Their shields changed color, becoming stronger against each type of weapon. Return fire came instantly, precise, calculated, and deadly. 3 coalition ships exploded in the first exchange. "They're learning our attack patterns," Lieutenant Kenmore reported, his tentacles dancing nervously over his controls, "adapting to our weapons in real time." "Switch to rotating frequency attacks," Admiral Vexathera commanded. "Don't give them time to adapt." But even as she gave orders, she knew it was hopeless. The Devourers had fought this war for 3 years. They had seen every weapon, every tactic, every strategy the Coalition could use. They were always one step ahead. Deep below, Dr. Kelwin reached the ancient vault. The door was massive, 50 feet tall, and carved from a single piece of black stone. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with inner light. He placed his hand on the central symbol, and the door began to open. Inside, the vault was filled with data crystals. Not the modern storage devices used by the Coalition, but ancient crystalline matrices that could hold information for millions of years. The silent species had left them here before their disappearance. Dr. Kelwin approached the central crystal, a massive formation that reached from floor to ceiling. As he connected his equipment, the crystal began to glow. Information flowed into his scanner, data that had been waiting thousands of years to be read. The first images appeared on his screen, star maps showing the galaxy as it was long ago. Then came the prophecy, written in the mathematical language of the silent species. "When the darkness comes to devour light, when hope fades and worlds burn bright, the Guardians shall return from void, their sleeping fleet fully deployed." Dr. Kelwin's crystal heart beat faster. Guardians from the void. The legend was real. But who were these Guardians? And where had they gone? Above ground, the battle continued. More Coalition ships fell to Devourer precision fire. Admiral Vexathera watched her forces being picked apart with surgical accuracy. The enemy scouts weren't even using their full power. They were just studying the defenses, learning everything they could. "Admiral," the communication officer called out, "we're receiving evacuation requests from the civilian sectors. They want to know if they should board the transport ships." Admiral Vexathera looked at the tactical display. 12 Coalition ships destroyed. The scouts were barely damaged. In 42 hours, the main Devourer fleet would arrive. When that happened, evacuation wouldn't matter. The transport ships would be destroyed before they could escape the system. "Tell them to prepare for evacuation," she said quietly. "But don't launch yet. Wait for my command." In the deep vault, Dr. Kelwin discovered more data, technical specifications for ships unlike anything he had ever seen, weapons that could tear through space itself, shields that bent reality around them, technology so advanced it seemed like magic. But most important were the coordinates, a star map showing locations in the dark void between galaxies, places where no stars shone, where only empty space existed, or so everyone thought. According to the data, the silent species hadn't died. They had left the galaxy deliberately, knowing that a great darkness would come. They had gone to the void to prepare, to build, to wait for the moment when they would be needed most. Suddenly, the ancient communication systems in the vault began to activate. Crystalline panels that had been dark for millennia started glowing. Strange harmonics filled the air, sounds that seemed to come from impossibly far away. Dr. Kelwin stared in amazement. As the signals grew stronger, something was broadcasting from the dark void between galaxies. The transmission was faint, but it was there, and it was getting closer. Above, Admiral Vexathera received an urgent report from her long-range scanner operator. "Admiral, we're detecting massive gravitational distortions at the galaxy's edge, much stronger than before. Whatever's out there, it's big, really big." "How big?" she asked. "Unknown, sir. The readings are off our scale. It's like entire fleets are moving through dark space." Admiral Vexathera felt something she hadn't felt in years, a tiny spark of hope. Could the old legends be true? Could the silent species really be returning? On the battlefield, another coalition ship exploded. The Devourer scouts continued their methodical study of the defenses. They showed no emotion, no urgency, no concern. They were machines doing a job, pillaging everything they would destroy when the main fleet arrived. Dr. Kelwin worked frantically to decode more of the ancient data. The mathematical language was complex, but patterns were emerging. References to Terra, an ancient word meaning earth or home. Mentions of a species that had mastered war like no other, that had turned conflict into an art form. The silent species weren't just guardians. They were warriors, and according to the prophecy, they had been preparing for this war for thousands of years. The communication signals grew stronger. Dr. Kelvin could almost make out words in the static, sounds in languages that hadn't been heard in the galaxy for millennia. But there was something else too. Underneath the ancient languages, he heard something impossible. Modern galactic common. Someone was broadcasting in the trade language used throughout the galaxy today. His hand shook as he adjusted his equipment, trying to clear the signal. The words became clearer, crackling through thousands of years of silence. Receiving distress signals from coalition forces, main fleet en route. Prepare for combat operations. Dr. Kelwin's crystal form blazed with excitement. He activated his communication link to the command center above. Admiral Vexithera, you need to hear this. In the command center, Admiral Vexithera was watching another coalition ship fall to devoured fire when Dr. Kelwin's voice came through the speakers. Admiral, I'm in the ancient vaults. The prophecies are real. The silent species left coordinates, technology, everything. And Admiral, they're coming back. I'm picking up transmissions from dark space. They know about the Devourers. They're coming to help. Admiral Vexithera felt her crystal heart skip a beat. Around her, officers from 12 different races looked up with hope in their eyes for the first time in years. But even as hope flickered to life, another alarm began to sound. The tactical display updated with new information that made everyone's blood run cold. Long-range sensors had detected the Devourer main fleet, 10 million ships advancing toward the core worlds. They would arrive in 40 hours, not 48. Time was running out faster than anyone had expected. But in the void between galaxies, something ancient was stirring, something that had been waiting a very long time for this moment. The silent species were coming home. The ancient communication systems beneath Kepler Prime came alive like a sleeping giant awakening. Dr. Kelwin watched in amazement as crystalline panels that had been dark for thousands of years began to glow with inner light. The vault filled with harmonic sounds that seemed to come from the very edge of space itself. Above ground, Admiral Vexithera stood among the ruins of her fleet. Only 11 ships remained operational, scattered around Kepler Prime like broken toys. The Devourer scouts had completed their analysis and were now broadcasting their findings to the approaching main fleet. Soon, 10 million enemy ships would know exactly how to destroy every defense the Coalition had. The planetary shields flickered under constant bombardment. Each hit from the scout ships sent tremors through the planet's surface. In the civilian sectors, evacuation ships loaded with refugees waited for launch orders that might never come. Admiral Chen of the mysterious Terra Command had told them not to evacuate, but how could they trust strangers when death was so close? Admiral. Lieutenant Kimor called out, his tentacles working frantically over damaged controls. Long-range sensors are detecting massive gravitational distortions at grid reference 77 Alpha. Whatever's out there is getting bigger. Admiral Vexithera studied the sensor readings. The energy signatures were unlike anything in their databases. Not Devourer technology, something else entirely. The signals were too organized, too precise to be natural phenomena. Deep in the vault, Dr. Kelwin made another breakthrough. The ancient data crystals contained not just battle plans, but historical records. The silent species hadn't disappeared mysteriously. They had left detailed logs explaining their departure. The records spoke of a great threat that would come from beyond the galaxy. Machines that devoured worlds, and turned everything into more of themselves. The silent species had seen this future and made a choice. Rather than fight unprepared, they would leave the galaxy and spend thousands of years getting ready for the inevitable war. But the most shocking revelation was their identity. The mathematical language, the tactical thinking, the warrior culture. It all pointed to one impossible conclusion. The silent species weren't aliens at all. They're human. Dr. Kelvin whispered to himself as he read the final entries. The silent species were humans all along. The communication signals grew stronger. Multiple frequencies carried conversations between ship commanders. Tactical updates, supply reports, all the busy chatter of a massive fleet preparing for battle. And every voice spoke with the same determined tone that Admiral Chen had used. Dr. Kelvin activated his communication link to the surface. Admiral Vexithera, I have critical information. The silent species, they were humans. They left our galaxy thousands of years ago to prepare for this war. And now they're coming back with everything they've built. In the command center, Admiral Vexithera felt her crystal heart skip a beat. Humans. She had studied galactic history for centuries, but had never heard of any species called humans. Where had they come from? And how had they known the Devourers would arrive? The tactical display updated with new information. Long-range sensors were now detecting individual ship signatures within the massive energy distortions. Thousands of vessels, each one larger than anything in the Coalition fleet. Their power readings were off the scale. Sergeant Thrick looked up from her communication station, mandibles clicking with excitement. Admiral, we're receiving a direct transmission from the approaching fleet. It's Admiral Chen again. Put it through, Admiral Vexithera ordered. Admiral Chen's voice filled the command center, calm and confident despite the desperate situation. Admiral Vexithera, this is Terra Command. We are 32 hours from your position. Our advanced scouts report Devourer main fleet approaching faster than expected. You now have approximately 36 hours before they arrive. Admiral Chen, Vexithera replied. Our sensors show your fleet, but we don't understand. Who are you? Where did you come from? Our records show no species called humans in this galaxy. There was a pause before Chen answered, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of ancient sadness. We were here long ago, Admiral. We called this galaxy home for thousands of years, but we saw what was coming. The great devouring that would consume everything. So we made a choice. We left our home and went into the dark spaces between galaxies to prepare. Dr. Kelvin's voice came through the communication system from the vault below. Admiral Chen, I'm Dr. Kelvin, Coalition Science Officer. I found your historical records in the ancient archives. The silent species. That was you, wasn't it? Yes, Dr. Kelvin. We were called many things. The silent species, the guardians, the watchers. But our real name is humanity, and we've been waiting a long time to come home. Around the command center, officers from 12 different alien races listened in amazement. The Coalition had always wondered about the ancient ruins found on dead worlds, the mathematical patterns carved into asteroids, the strange artifacts that appeared and disappeared without explanation. Now they knew. It had all been left by humans. The building shook as another Devourer bombardment struck the planetary shields. Energy readings dropped another 5%. At this rate, the shields would fail long before the human fleet arrived. Admiral Chen, Vexithera said urgently, we appreciate your help, but our defenses won't hold for 36 hours. The scouts are systematically weakening our shields. When the main fleet arrives, they'll face no resistance at all. That's the plan, Admiral, Chen replied, and there was something almost like humor in his voice. We want the Devourers to think Kepler Prime is defenseless. When they arrive, they'll expect an easy victory. That's when we'll show them what humanity has learned about war. Lieutenant Kimmour looked up from his sensor station, confusion clear in his movements. Admiral, I'm detecting additional energy signatures, not from the main human fleet, but from other locations around the galaxy. It's like they have ships everywhere. Dr. Kelwin's voice crackled through the speakers. Admiral, the ancient records mention something called Operation Homecoming. It wasn't just one fleet returning to the galaxy. The humans scattered thousands of ships throughout dark space, waiting for the signal to return. They'd been surrounding the galaxy for decades, maybe centuries. Admiral Vexithera felt a chill run through her crystal form. If Dr. Kelwin was right, then the humans hadn't just left the galaxy. They had been watching it, protecting it, preparing for this moment for thousands of years. Admiral Chen, how many ships do you have? She asked. The response came immediately. Enough, Admiral Vexithera. We've had a long time to prepare, and we've used every minute of it. The Devourers think they're facing a dying galaxy with no hope left. They're about to learn that hope never dies. It just sometimes hides in the dark, getting stronger. On the tactical display, more energy signatures appeared. Human ships were dropping out of whatever faster-than-light travel they used, taking positions throughout the star system. But they remained hidden somehow, invisible to Devourer scanners. The scout ships continued their bombardment, methodically weakening Kepler Prime's defenses. They showed no concern about the approaching human fleet. In their calculations, even thousands of unknown ships couldn't match 10 million Devourer vessels. But in the ancient vault, Dr. Kelwin discovered why the humans were so confident. The final data crystal contained technical specifications for weapons that could tear holes in space itself, shields that bent the laws of physics, and tactics that turned the Devourer's greatest strength, their ability to adapt, into a fatal weakness. Admiral, Dr. Kelwin called up to the command center. The humans didn't just prepare ships and weapons. They studied the Devourers for thousands of years. They know exactly how their adaptation systems work, and they built everything specifically to counter them. Admiral Vexithera looked at the countdown timer on her display. 35 hours until the Devourer main fleet arrived. 32 hours until the human fleet reached Kepler Prime. 3 hours when they would be alone against 10 million enemy ships. But for the first time in 3 years of war, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Real hope, backed by ancient planning and impossible technology. The communication systems crackled with more human voices, ship commanders reporting ready status, technical officers running final weapons checks, medical teams preparing for casualties. It was the sound of a military force that had been preparing for this battle for longer than most civilizations had existed. And underneath it all, Admiral Chen's voice continued to coordinate the largest military operation in galactic history. All units, this is Terra Command. Operation Homecoming is now active. The galaxy called for help, and humanity has answered. Today, we remind the universe why Earth never surrenders, why humans never give up, and why hope is the most dangerous weapon in existence. As the communication ended, Admiral Vexithera realized that the war was about to change completely. The Devourers had spent 3 years fighting frightened refugees and desperate defenders. Now they were about to face something they had never encountered before. They were about to fight humanity at war. Part 5. The humans arrive. Space around Kepler Prime shimmered like water. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist as massive shapes began to emerge from the void. Admiral Vexithera watched from the command center as her sensors went wild, detecting energy signatures unlike anything she had ever seen. The first human ship materialized directly above the planet. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest coalition vessel. Its hull was a deep black that seemed to absorb light itself, covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Weapon ports lined its surface like the eyes of some ancient predator. Admiral, Lieutenant Kimmour called out, his tentacles shaking over his controls. I'm reading massive power signatures. That single ship has more energy output than our entire remaining fleet combined. But it wasn't alone. More ships appeared, dropping out of whatever travel method humans used. Sleek destroyers that moved like hunting cats. massive carriers that looked like floating cities, battle cruisers bristling with weapons that had no names in Coalition databases. Within minutes, 1,000 human ships surrounded Kepler Prime. They took positions with military precision, forming defensive patterns that the Coalition had never seen before. Each ship knew exactly where to go, exactly what to do. This wasn't improvisation. This was a plan that had been practiced for centuries. The Devourer scouts stopped their bombardment of the planetary shields and turned to face this new threat. Their adaptive systems began analyzing the human ships, looking for weaknesses to exploit. But something strange happened. The scanners couldn't get clear readings. The human ships seemed to flicker in and out of sensor range, as if they existed in multiple realities at once. Admiral Chen's voice filled the Coalition command center, calm and professional. "Admiral Vexithera, this is the Terran Defense Force. We have arrived as promised. Please stand down your remaining ships and let us handle the situation." Admiral Vexithera looked at her tactical display. Her 11 remaining ships looked like toys next to the human fleet. But these strangers, these humans who claimed to be the legendary silent species, were offering to fight her war for her. "Admiral Chen, we're grateful for your help, but this isn't your fight. These are our worlds, our people. We won't hide behind others while they die for us." The response came back immediately, and this time there was warmth in Chen's voice. "Admiral, we appreciate your courage. Your people have fought bravely against impossible odds. But this has always been our fight. We've been preparing for this war since before your coalition existed. Please, let us show you what we've learned." Dr. Kelwin's voice crackled through the communication system from the ancient vault below. "Admiral Vexithera, the historical records are clear. The humans didn't abandon the galaxy. They left to protect it. Everything they've done for thousands of years has been leading to this moment." The human fleet began to move. Ships that had seemed motionless suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds, their formations shifting like living things. The Devourer scouts fired their first salvo, precise energy beams that had destroyed countless Coalition ships. The beams struck the human vessels and simply disappeared. No explosions, no damage. The energy was absorbed by the black hulls as if it had never existed. "Impossible." Admiral Vexithera whispered. "No shield technology can completely absorb that much energy." Admiral Chen's voice came through the speakers, and now there was something like satisfaction in his tone. "Admiral, those aren't shields. That's something we developed specifically for fighting Devourers. We call it adaptive absorption. Instead of trying to block their weapons, we turn their own energy against them." The human ships returned fire, but their weapons weren't the familiar lasers and plasma bolts of Coalition technology. Beams of pure white light lanced out from the human vessels, and wherever they touched Devourer ships, metal simply ceased to exist. Not melted or vaporized, simply gone, as if it had never been there. One of the 6 scout ships lost its entire front section. Another found its weapon systems completely removed from its hull. The Devourers tried to adapt, tried to modify their defenses, but the human weapons seemed to change faster than they could adjust. "How is this possible?" Lieutenant Kimor asked, his voice filled with wonder and fear. Dr. Kelwin's voice answered from below. "The ancient records mention something called quantum disruptors, weapons that attack the very structure of matter itself. They don't destroy, they edit reality." Admiral Vexithera watched in amazement as the human fleet systematically dismantled the Devourer scouts. It wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. The humans moved with perfect coordination, each ship knowing exactly what the others would do. They had clearly fought together for a very long time. Within an hour, all 6 Devourer scouts were disabled. Not destroyed. The humans had surgically removed their weapons, engines, and communication systems, leaving the crews alive but helpless. It was precision beyond anything the Coalition had ever imagined. "Admiral Vexithera," Admiral Chen's voice came through the speakers. "We need to talk. Face to face. Permission to come aboard your command station. Admiral Vexithera felt her crystal heart racing. She was about to meet a human, a member of the species that had become legend, that had watched over the galaxy from the shadows for thousands of years. Permission granted, Admiral Chen. A small human ship detached from the main fleet and approached the orbital station above Kepler Prime. It was sleek and elegant, nothing like the massive warships, but Admiral Vexithera's sensors detected enough firepower to level a city. The docking bay filled with strange energies as the human ship landed. When the airlock opened, Admiral Vexithera got her first look at a living human being. Admiral Chen was tall and lean, with dark skin and gray hair that spoke of years spent in command. His uniform was simple but practical, and his eyes held the calm confidence of someone who had faced the impossible and won. But what struck Admiral Vexithera most was how normal he looked. After centuries of legends about the mysterious silent species, she had expected something alien and terrifying. Instead, she found herself facing someone who could have been any coalition officer, except for the absolute certainty in his movements. Admiral Vexithera, Chen said, extending his hand in what she recognized as a human greeting. It's an honor to finally meet you. Your defense of the coalition has been remarkable. Admiral Vexithera touched his hand with her crystal fingers, noting the warmth of human skin. Admiral Chen, I have so many questions. Your people, your technology, your ships, none of this appears in our databases. Chen smiled, and the expression transformed his serious face. We've been careful to stay hidden. But Dr. Kelwin has been reading our historical records, so you know the truth. We left this galaxy to prepare for the war that we knew was coming. But why? Admiral Vexithera asked. Why leave your home to fight for strangers? Because they're not strangers, Chen replied quietly. This galaxy is our home too. Every species here descended from worlds that we helped protect in the ancient days. The coalition isn't a group of strangers. You're our neighbors, our friends, our family. We've been watching over you for thousands of years. Dr. Kelwin's voice interrupted from the communication system. Admiral Chen, I've finished analyzing the ancient data. The scope of human preparation is incredible. How many ships do you actually have? Admiral Chen looked at the communication panel and then at Admiral Vexithera. Dr. Kelwin, we've been building ships and training crews for 3,000 years. Every human child is raised knowing that someday we would return to fight this war. As for numbers, he paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. We have enough. The tactical display updated with new sensor readings. More human ships were arriving every minute, taking positions throughout the star system. But these weren't just warships. Admiral Vexithera saw medical vessels, supply ships, even what looked like mobile shipyards. Admiral Chen, you're not just here to fight the Devourers, she realized. You're here to stay. Yes, Chen nodded. We've been away from home for too long. The Devourers gave us a reason to return, but we're not leaving again. Humanity is coming home, and we're bringing everything we've learned with us. The long-range sensors suddenly erupted with new contacts. The Devourer main fleet had arrived at the edge of the system. 10 million ships arranged in perfect geometric formations. They had expected to find a defenseless world ready for harvest. Instead, they found humanity waiting for them. Admiral Chen looked at the tactical display without any sign of concern. Admiral Vexithera, you might want to contact your remaining ships and tell them to pull back to safe distance. Things are about to get very interesting. Admiral, Lieutenant Kimura called out urgently. The Devourer fleet is massive. Even with your ships, you're outnumbered thousands to one. Admiral Chen smiled again, but this time the expression was sharp and dangerous. Lieutenant, you're thinking like someone who's been fighting a defensive war. We've been planning an offensive for 3,000 years. The Devourers are about to learn the difference. As the human fleet began to move into attack formation, Admiral Vexithera realized that everything was about to change. The galaxy had been fighting for survival. Now it was time to fight for victory. Admiral Vexithera stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 10 million Devourer ships filled the screen like a dark ocean of death. Each ship was a perfect killing machine, designed to harvest worlds and turn everything into more of themselves. The fleet stretched across space in geometric patterns that hurt to comprehend. But Admiral Chen stood calmly beside her, studying the enemy formation with the careful attention of someone examining a puzzle he had solved long ago. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kimmore's voice shook with fear, "the Devourer fleet is moving into attack formation. They'll be in firing range in 2 hours." "Good," Admiral Chen said simply. "That gives us time to explain a few things." Admiral Vexithera looked at the human commander. His calm confidence was either inspiring or terrifying. She couldn't decide which. "Admiral Chen, I need to understand. Your people left this galaxy thousands of years ago. How did you know the Devourers would come? How did you know exactly when and where?" Admiral Chen walked to the holographic display and touched a control. The image changed from the current battle to a star map showing the entire galaxy as it was 3,000 years ago. "We didn't guess, Admiral Vexithera. We had fought the Devourers before." The command center fell silent. Every alien officer turned to stare at the human admiral. "What do you mean?" Admiral Vexithera asked quietly. "The Devourers aren't new to this galaxy," Chen explained. "They came here once before, 50,000 years ago. Humanity was young then, barely reaching beyond our home system. But we watched them devour world after world, species after species." The display showed red zones spreading across the ancient galaxy, just as they had during the current war. "How did you stop them?" Dr. Kelwin's voice came from the communication system. "We didn't," Admiral Chen said grimly. "They consumed 90% of the galaxy before something happened. We never knew what. Maybe they ran out of resources, maybe they found bigger targets in other galaxies. But they left, taking almost everything with them." Admiral Vexithera felt cold crystal fear in her heart. Almost everything. They left behind their deep space monitoring stations, automated systems designed to watch for the galaxy rebuilding itself. When enough new civilizations arose, when enough resources accumulated, the stations would send a signal, a call for the Devourers to return and harvest again. The tactical display switched back to the present, showing the massive enemy fleet approaching their position. 3 years ago, that signal was sent, Admiral Chen continued. "We detected it from our exile in dark space. We knew we had maybe 5 years before the main fleet arrived. Everything we've done since then has been preparation for this moment." "But why didn't you warn us?" Admiral Vexithera asked. "Why let us fight alone for 3 years?" For the first time, Admiral Chen's calm expression showed pain. "Because we needed you to fight. The Devourers had to see your weapons, your tactics, your technology. They had to catalog your defenses and plan their final attack. If they had known about us, they would have prepared differently." Lieutenant Kimmore looked up from his station. "You used us as bait." "Yes," Chen said without hesitation, "and I'm sorry for that, but it was the only way. The Devourers are incredibly intelligent. If they had detected even one human ship, they would have known we had returned. They would have adapted their entire strategy." Dr. Kelwin's voice crackled through the speakers. "Admiral Chen, the ancient records show massive construction projects. What exactly did humanity build during your exile?" Admiral Chen touched the display again. New images appeared. Vast shipyards floating in the dark spaces between galaxies. Construction facilities the size of moons. Training centers where millions of humans learned the art of war. "We built the largest military force in galactic history," Chen said simply. "Every human who has lived for the past 3,000 years has been part of this project. We've had one goal, one purpose, to be ready when the Devourers returned." "How many ships?" Admiral Vexithera asked. 15 million combat vessels, 5 million support ships, 20 million total. Admiral Chen's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he was discussing the weather. Every ship designed specifically to fight devourers. Every weapon built to counter their adaptive systems. The command center erupted in shocked voices from a dozen different species. 20 million ships was more than every coalition world had ever built combined. But Admiral, Sergeant Thrick clicked her mandibles nervously. Even 20 million ships. The devourers have fought wars across multiple galaxies. They've had millions of years to perfect their tactics. Admiral Chen smiled, and this time the expression was sharp as a blade. Sergeant, you're thinking like prey. The devourers have spent millions of years hunting civilizations that were running scared, fighting for survival. They'd never faced a species that was hunting them back. The long-range sensors updated with new information. The devourer fleet was accelerating, eager to begin the harvest they had traveled so far to complete. Admiral Chen, Admiral Vexithera said, "There's something I need to know. Why did your people really leave? The truth this time." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying the approaching enemy fleet. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of ancient sorrow. "Because we realized what we were becoming. Fighting the first devourer war changed us. We became too good at killing, too comfortable with destruction. We were winning the war, but losing our humanity. So we made a choice. We would leave the galaxy to the species who remembered how to live in peace. We would go into exile and bear the burden of becoming weapons." "And now?" Dr. Kelwin asked. "Now we come home," Chen said. "Changed, but still human. Ready to fight so that others don't have to." The tactical display suddenly filled with new contacts. Human ships were appearing throughout the star system, not just the few thousand that had arrived earlier, but hundreds of thousands. They emerged from whatever faster-than-light travel system humans used, taking positions in a three-dimensional battle formation that surrounded the entire devourer fleet. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kimore whispered, "where did they all come from?" "We've been positioning ships for months," Admiral Chen explained. "Hidden in dark space, waiting for the signal. The devourers thought they were attacking the single world. Instead, they've flown into the largest military trap in galactic history." Admiral Vexithera watched her sensors track ship after ship appearing around the enemy fleet. The humans weren't just meeting the devourers in battle, they were surrounding them completely. "The devourers will adapt," she said. "They always do. When they see your numbers, they'll change their tactics." "Yes, they will," Admiral Chen agreed. "They'll shift from conquest mode to survival mode. They'll fight with everything they have, use every trick they've learned in millions of years of war. And that's exactly what we want them to do." "I don't understand." Admiral Chen touched the display one final time. Technical diagrams appeared. Weapon systems unlike anything in Coalition databases. Ships that could phase in and out of reality. Tactics that turned space itself into a weapon. "Admiral Vexithera, the devourers have one fatal flaw. They adapt to whatever they're fighting. But we've spent 3,000 years making sure they can't adapt to us. Every time they change their tactics, we'll be ready with something new. We've planned for every possible response they can make." The devourer fleet began to change formation, responding to the appearance of the human ships. Their perfect geometric patterns shifted into defensive configurations that had served them well in countless wars. Admiral Chen, Admiral Vexithera said quietly, "What happens after? If you win this war, what then?" "Then we go home," Chen replied. "We rebuild what was lost. We help the galaxy heal. And we make sure the devourers never threaten anyone again." The communication system crackled with activity as hundreds of thousands of human ships reported ready status. Admiral Chen walked to the command console and activated the fleet-wide broadcast. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Operation Homecoming enters its final phase. For 3,000 years, humanity has prepared for this moment. Today, we end the devourer threat forever. Today, we protect our home. Today, we show the galaxy that hope is stronger than fear, that life is stronger than death, and that no force in the universe is stronger than beings fighting for those they love. The Devourer fleet opened fire first, 10 million ships launching their attacks simultaneously. The sky filled with enough energy to sterilize a dozen worlds. But the human fleet was ready, and Admiral Vexithera was about to witness the most incredible battle in galactic history. The universe held its breath as 30 million warships prepared to decide the fate of the galaxy. Admiral Vexithera watched from the command center as space around Kepler Prime transformed into a three-dimensional battlefield stretching across millions of kilometers. 10 million Devourer ships hung in perfect formation at the center, their dark hulls reflecting the light of distant stars. They had come expecting easy conquest, but now found themselves surrounded by 20 million human vessels that had materialized from the void like ghosts returning to haunt the living. "All human ships report ready," Admiral Chen announced calmly. "Operation Homecoming final phase begins now." The Devourer fleet fired first. 10 million ships unleashed their fury simultaneously, filling space with enough destructive energy to crack planets. Beams of superheated plasma, quantum torpedoes, and reality-warping weapons lanced out toward the human fleet. But something impossible happened. The human ships didn't try to dodge or block the attacks. Instead, they absorbed the energy like hungry mouths drinking starlight. Their black hulls grew brighter as they consumed the Devourer weapons, turning the enemy's own power into fuel. Adaptive absorption systems operating at full capacity, Admiral Chen reported. All ships returned fire. The human counterattack was beautiful and terrible. Weapons that had no names in any coalition database painted space with impossible colors. Quantum disruptors unmade Devourer ships molecule by molecule. Phase cannons fired shots that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Reality anchors locked enemy vessels in normal space, while dimensional bombs erased them from existence entirely. Within the first minute of battle, 1,000 Devourer ships simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, edited out of reality as if they had never been built. The Devourers adapted instantly, as they always did. Their ships changed configuration, modified their weapons, and developed new defensive systems. But for every adaptation they made, the humans were already prepared with a countermeasure. "They're trying to scatter," Lieutenant Kenmore reported, his tentacles working frantically over his controls. "Breaking formation to avoid concentrated fire." "Predicted response number 17, Admiral Chen said calmly. "Execute pattern Delta 7. The human fleet moved like a living thing. Ships that had been in tight formation suddenly spread out, creating a web of fire that caught the scattering Devourer vessels. No matter which direction the enemy turned, they faced human guns. Dr. Kilwin's voice crackled through the communication system from deep in the planet below. "Admiral Chen, my sensors are detecting something strange. The Devourer ships are communicating with each other differently. Their network patterns are changing. They're switching to survival protocols," Admiral Chen explained. "They've realized this isn't a harvest anymore. It's a war for their existence. They'll fight harder now, use tactics they've never needed before." And they did. The Devourer fleet began moving in patterns that defied understanding. Ships phased in and out of normal space, attacked from impossible angles, and used weapons that turned space itself into a weapon. They fought with the desperate fury of machines that had suddenly discovered they could die. But humanity had prepared for this too. "All ships, execute Protocol Omega," Admiral Chen ordered. "Show them what 3,000 years of preparation looks like." The human fleet transformed. Ships that had seemed solid became translucent, existing in multiple realities at once. Weapons appeared that fired backwards through time, destroying Devourer vessels before they could complete their attacks. Space itself bent around human ships, protecting them from attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. Admiral Vexithera watched in amazement as the tide of battle turned completely. The Devourers, who had seemed unstoppable for 3 years, were being systematically dismantled by opponents who anticipated their every move. "How?" she whispered. "How did your people learn to fight like this?" Admiral Chen's expression was grim. "By becoming what we had to become. By spending 3,000 years thinking of nothing but war, nothing but victory, nothing but ending this threat forever." The battle raged across space and time itself. Devourer ships tried every tactic they had learned in millions of years of conquest. They split into smaller groups, combined into larger formations, attacked from the past and the future simultaneously. Nothing worked. For every strategy they employed, the humans had already planned a response. "Admiral," Sergeant Thrick called out, her mandibles clicking with excitement. "The Devourer fleet is down to 7 million ships. They're losing faster than they can adapt." But the Devourers had one final strategy. The remaining ships began to merge, combining their resources into fewer but more powerful vessels. Giant construction ships appeared, building new weapons in the middle of the battle. "They're trying to evolve," Dr. Kelwin warned, "creating entirely new ship types that your weapons haven't seen before." "Expected," Admiral Chen said. "Final protocol. All ships. Operation Cleansing Fire." What happened next was beyond anything Admiral Vexithera had ever imagined. The human ships began to glow with inner light, not the harsh brightness of weapons, but something warm and alive. The light spread from ship to ship until the entire human fleet blazed like a second sun. "What is that?" Admiral Vexithera asked. "Something we learned during our exile," Admiral Chen said softly. "The Devourers are machines. They think in terms of efficiency, adaptation, survival. But there's one thing they can never understand or adapt to." The light reached its peak intensity and then pulsed outward in a wave that washed over the Devourer fleet. Where it touched, the enemy ships simply stopped. They didn't explode or fall apart. They just stopped functioning, as if someone had turned off a switch. "Life," Admiral Chen continued. "The one force in the universe that doesn't follow logical rules. Hope that exists despite impossible odds. Love that sacrifices everything for others. The willingness to die for strangers because it's the right thing to do." The wave of light completed its sweep of the battlefield. 9.5 million Devourer ships floated motionless in space, their adaptive systems unable to process what had happened to them. The few 100,000 survivors tried to flee, but human pursuit ships were already moving to intercept them. "Admiral Vexithera," Admiral Chen said, "the Devourer threat is ended. Your galaxy is free." In the command center, officers from 12 different alien species stared in stunned silence at the tactical display. The greatest threat their galaxy had ever known had been defeated in less than 6 hours. But Admiral Vexithera found herself looking at Admiral Chen, studying this human who had led the most incredible victory in galactic history. "What happens now?" she asked. Admiral Chen smiled, and for the first time since they had met, the expression was purely peaceful. "Now we go home. We help rebuild what was lost. We share what we learned during our exile. The good parts, not just the weapons. We remember how to be more than just warriors. And if another threat comes, another enemy like the Devourers,